हेलो फ्रेंड्स, क्या हाल है दोस्तों। जैसा कि मैंने प्रॉमिस किया था, बहुत बढ़िया पॉडकास्ट बना रहा हूँ मैं आपके लिए। हिस्टोरिकल इन नेचर एंड नॉलेज उनमें कूट कूट के भरी हुई है, खास तौर पे यूपीएससी एस्पायरेंट्स के लिए। यूपीएससी मेंस या सीडीएस, एफकैट, एनडीए, एनी एग्जाम वेयर यू विश टू बी अ क्लास वन ऑफिसर, ये पॉडकास्ट आपको देखनी चाहिए। आज हम बात करेंगे वेस्ट एशिया की। जी हाँ, आज बात करेंगे हमारी धरती पे जो सबसे पुराना कॉन्फ्लिक्ट चल रहा है, द ओल्डेस्ट कॉन्फ्लिक्ट दैट इज लिंगरिंग ऑन ऑन प्लैनेट अर्थ, दैट इज द इशू ऑफ पैलेस्टीन एंड इजराइल। उस पे मैं आज अपने गेस्ट को लेकर आया हूं, डॉक्टर स्टैनली जॉनी। जी हाँ, यंग स्कॉलर हैं। उन्होंने अपनी एमफिल और पीएचडी जेएनयू से करी है और वेस्ट एशिया पे करी है। बहुत बार ये वेस्ट एशिया गए। हमने इनसे बातचीत करी। पहले, व्हाट इज वेस्ट एशिया, इंडिया का क्या इंटरेस्ट है वेस्ट एशिया में, हाउ इज इजराइल पॉइज्ड इन द प्रेजेंट वॉर, इजराइल हमास वॉर जो 2 महीने से चल रहा है, इस युद्ध में कभी विराम होगा या नहीं होगा, व्हेन विल वी हैव सम पीस इन दिस रीजन, व्हाट इज द जियोपॉलिटिकल स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ दिस रीजन, what are India's interests, what are India's options, the role played by US, the role played by UK initially to establish a Jewish state in the area of Palestine। बहुत ही ज़बरदस्त कन्वर्जेशन हमने की, जिसमें हमने सऊदी अरेबिया, ईरान, यूएई, कतर, जॉर्डन, इजिप्ट, जूइश लॉबी इन यूएस, रशिया, चाइना, इस सब को हमने एनालाइज किया इस डिस्कशन के अंदर विद डॉक्टर स्टैनली जॉनी। ये द हिंदू के इंटरनेशनल कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंट हैं, सीनियर कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंट हैं, और मैं अपनी क्लासेस में इनके आर्टिकल्स आप देखते रहते हैं, मैं पढ़ के आपको सुनाता रहता हूँ। ही इज़, आई थिंक, वन ऑफ द बेस्ट स्कॉलर जर्नलिस्ट, आई वुड से, हु लुक्स एट वेस्ट एशिया वेरी वेरी क्लोजली। कई बार खुद जेरूसलम, गाजा स्ट्रिप, इस सब जगह गए हैं। पिछले साल ये वहीं पे थे जहाँ पर अभी जो है लड़ाई चल रही है। सो हियर फ्रॉम हिम the entire story of Israel-Palestine issue, the options available, two-state option, one-state option, third-state option, क्या options हैं, and when can we have peace in this area. So watch this podcast and subscribe to my channel, because this channel is purely for knowledge, motivation and inspiration. So आ जाओ, कहाँ घूम रहे हो। Thank you, जय हिंद। Dr. Stanly Johny, what a pleasure to see you this morning. And I've been reading your articles in the Hindu. I consider you as one of the experts on West Asia, and so what a pleasure to see you, a scholar, journalist, on my show, that is Mor Talks, which is followed by a large number of people. So how are you now? How are you today?
Yeah, thank you, General. I'm fine. All good here. Thank you.
Yeah, just before we warm up to the session, just tell me about a little bit of your background. Where did you study, and how did you get interest into West Asia and to your PhD from JNU?
So I did my PG in Kerala, Mahatma Gandhi University. So one of the professors was a West Asia expert. So I still remember sitting in his classes where he would be explaining to us about Gaza, West Bank, Israel, Palestine. So I got interested in the topic. So then I went to Delhi to do my MPhil and PhD. I was in JNU. So I got admission in the West Asian Studies of School of International Studies. So ever since I have been focused on the region as a student of West Asian geopolitics. So my supervisor, Professor Gulshan Deetil, is an authority on the topic. So I did both my MPhil and PhD with her. She kind of helped me shape my knowledge about the region.
Great. And a very fascinating region from India's point of view.
It is very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Because especially for India, it's our extended neighborhood. For multiple reasons, the region is important for us. Energy security. We have millions of Indians working in the region. And also in terms of, counterterrorism, etc., we have very close ties with the Gulf Arab countries. And Israel is also a major defense partner as regards India is concerned. So India has and Iran is our gateway to Central Asia. So if you look at West Asia from an Indian point of view, it's a vital region, and stability in the region is in our national interest.
So if for a layman who just young students who are just getting to know a bit outside India, how would you describe which all countries form part of West Asia? Why it's called West Asia? Some people call it Southwest Asia, and some people call it Middle East. So what is the correct nomenclature, and which are the major countries which is the geographical block we are talking of?
Okay, so if we look at the region, if you look at the map, I would say that countries on the one side, starting from you know let's say between the Mediterranean Ocean on the one side, you have countries like Syria,
Jordan.
Israel, which share borders with the Mediterranean Sea. And then on the other side, you have Iran, which is on the other tip of West Asia, which is also bordering with Central Asia, and which also includes Gulf Arab countries, the whole Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Oman, etc., etc. And then other Arab countries, including Jordan, Iraq, where Iraq is also a Gulf country, but is on the northern edge of Gulf, and Jordan is between Saudi Arabia and Israel. So this is the region which is largely referred to West Asia, and I try to stick to West Asia, not the Middle East, because Middle East is basically it's a colonial term. So if you want to be, there is nothing wrong in using a colonial term because this has been popularized. Even people in the region now use, especially if you go to the Gulf, they call it the Middle East. So, and if you are writing for an international publication, you will have to write the Middle East. You can't write West Asia if you are writing for an American paper. So it's been popularized, but at the same time, my point is that if you want to be geographically precise, if you want to get the correct nomenclature, the region which is on the western side of the Asian continent is West Asia. It's like calling the United States a North American country.
Okay.
Canada being a North American country, Brazil being a South American country, Israel is a West Asian country, Saudi Arabia is a West Asian Arab country.
Great. Great to hear this because there is this confusion always. Now, tell me, we won't dwell too much into history. We will dwell more into the present crisis. But just tell me, last 100 odd years, which are the major powers which have played a role in shaping up the West Asia that we see today?
So interestingly, if you look at the past 100 plus years, before the First World War, most of the West Asian region was controlled by the Ottomans. And at the end of the First World War, 1917, 1918, the Ottoman Empire collapses. And in 1917, you can still see the iconic picture of General LNB walking into Jerusalem after the Ottomans were defeated by the British. So that also announced the arrival of Britain as a great power, as an unopposed great power in the region. Britain had always maintained its presence in the region, but after the Second World War, Britain becomes the most important player in the region. So what we the crisis which we see now between Israel and Palestine. So the whole region, which was called historical Palestine, was a British colony. It was mandated British mandated Palestine from 1918 until 1948, until when the state of Israel was created. So let's say that during the interwar period between the First World War and Second World War, Britain was the most important great power in the region. And some other countries were French colonies, but mostly Britain called the shot because Britain emerged victorious from the First World War. But you see after the Second World War, the region went through rapid changes. It was also a period of decolonization. You witnessed Arab nationalist movements. For example, Jamal Abdel Nasser captured power in Egypt, and you saw the rise of Ba'athis in Syria and Iraq. So Lebanon became independent of French rule. So you saw different changes happening in the region. But at the same time, Britain's power was declining, as we know, in the post-Second World War order. So from this, at least from 1956, I'm saying because it was in 1956 when the Suez War happened, when Israel invaded Egypt. Israel invaded Egypt with help from Britain and France. triggering a major war, the Suez War. But the issue was that by that time, the regional power dynamics had changed. Britain became a power of the yesteryears. There were new sheriffs in the town, the United States and the Soviet Union. So both the United States and the Soviet Union were unhappy with the Suez War. So both President Eisenhower and the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev asked Israel to pull back. And Israel had to pull back and vacate the territories. So the Suez crisis kind of announced, the arrival of a new great power in the region, effectively the United States, and end of the British era in the region. So ever since, we can say the United States has remained the most important power, most important outside external power in the region, because Israel is America's most closest ally. Saudi Arabia is also an American ally. Iran was an American ally till 1979. And since 1979, Iran has been an American rival. So if you look at the geopolitics of the region, the United States is connected to every major players in one way or the other.
But now with the, somewhere United States has taken its eyes off the ball, and that's what they say in Middle East, and Russia and China are emerging as new powers, various activities you see. So is it true that US is also, its influence is declining or will decline in future?
What I would like to call it, I have written about it, I would like to call it deprioritization of West Asia. So the United States, there is an argument that the United States influence is declining. But at the same time, we can also see that the United States is willfully deprioritizing the West Asia because the United States is facing far greater conventional challenges in Europe and Indo-Pacific. Because if you look at American foreign policy from 2011 onwards, after the September 11 attack, the US had been the sole superpower. It didn't face any challenges from conventional powers. So global terrorism was its main enemy. So it's been fighting global terrorism. But now, if you look at the map, you see the Russians trying to challenge the post-war security architecture forcefully in Europe. And the Chinese are now a very powerful force to reckon with. So the US now realizes that it is facing much more tangible, conventional powers to its global influence. So its focus is now shifting away from West Asia. That's happening. But at the same time, US may not leave West Asia. I've been saying this for quite a long time. The US is not exiting West Asia. America has huge military presence in the region. So it would continue to play a major security role in the region. But the deprioritization is opening up space for other players. Like you mentioned, President Putin was there in the region just 2 days ago. And the Chinese are playing a very active role in the region, especially after the Gaza crisis. So the deprioritization is opening up space for America's rivals or competitors to up the game in the region.
Great. I know, very interesting. Now I want to come with that wonderful, we've set the stage. Now tell me about the present crisis, the Israel-Hamas war. Do you see it will continue? We never expected this war to continue for 2 months, but there seems to be no respite. So what are your views? When can we see a ceasefire? And when will, this actually happen? And what do you see will be the future of Gaza now after this?
Okay, so I don't know if there would be a lasting ceasefire in the immediate future, because the Israelis are clearly not interested in ceasefire. That is also because Israelis cannot accept a ceasefire because they had set such lofty goals before the war began. They said they wanted to crush Hamas, dismantle Hamas. And it's been more than 60 days since the war began, of which some 53 days of fighting. So there was a 7-day truce in between. So in this 53 days of fighting, if you are a general, you understand military strategy better than me. So if you look at it from an operational point of view, I think my assessment is that Israel achieved very little when you compare it with Israel's declared objectives. They wanted to crush Hamas. The Israeli assessment itself says that 5,000 Hamas, fighters were killed in the 53 days of fighting. Hamas has apparently a fighting force of 30,000, 40,000, or 50,000, depending on your estimates. And you killed 16,000, 17,000 people, and of which only 5,000 were Hamas fighters. And of the 17,000 people, 7,000 are children, and the rest are women. So look at the casualties, the humanitarian toll, and the very less number of the Hamas fighters we are killing. That is one thing. Secondly, no top Hamas leader has been killed. Israel had said that Yahya Sinwar was a dead man walking. Mohammed Deif was living on borrowed time. But the borrowed time is being extended, right? It's been 2 months of fighting and they are still alive. And again, of this 53 days of fighting, Israel released only one hostage through its military operation. Only one hostage of the 240. And the rest of the hostages, dozens of hostages who were released through diplomatic talks, not through fighting. So I think this is a completely different war which is unfolding before us. Because in 1967, when Israel went to war with Arab countries, it defeated all the major Arab neighbors in 6 days. It defeated Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, everybody in 6 days. Now, 53 days, it was fighting Hamas, which doesn't even have an air defense. It is a completely besieged enclave of Gaza, and the war is still going on. So Israel also wants a face-saving exit if it has to agree for a ceasefire, and it is not getting that. So and also Israel doesn't face any meaningful international pressure for the humanitarian toll, because just yesterday, UN Security Council resolution which called for a humanitarian ceasefire. 13 members of the UN Security Council voted for it. The United Kingdom abstained, but the United States vetoed it. So the US continues to support Israel's military operation. So I think I don't see any immediate end to the conflict. It is likely to go on. And secondly, what would be your second question? What would be the condition of Gaza? I think, as the UN Secretary General has pointed out, it is already a catastrophe. The UN says Gaza has become a graveyard for children and a living hell for everybody else. So the condition is terrible in Gaza, and Israeli continuous bombing, is becoming the enclave inhabitable. So it is very difficult to foresee the post-war future of Gaza.
I know. I heard the UN Secretary General live yesterday, and when he was giving figures, it was horrifying. 60% of the houses have gone, and the number of children, women killed. And now come to this issue of 7th October, this blitzkrieg, this surprise. As a military man, we were fascinated, absolutely brilliant tactics going on under the nose of Israelis, known for their snooping world over, best intelligence, best technology. They've been exporting to everyone, including India. Just tell me what happened. Is this the thing which Israelis are unable to accept, this attack on 7th October? Your views on that now, 2 months later?
I think Israel was, as you said, Israel was caught by surprise. Israel's focus was on the West Bank. So in Gaza has seen several flashpoints in the past, ever since 2005, when Israel withdrew from Gaza. But all the flashpoints were different in a sense. Hamas would fire rockets into Israel, hundreds of rockets, maybe 1,000 rockets. And then Israel has Iron Dome deployed around main cities. It is also deployed on the border. So I visited the Gaza border last year in November. So an Israeli spokesperson was with us. We were a group of journalists. So he explained to us how Israel is, put out surveillance mechanisms. They have unmanned surveillance posts. They have huge security barrier, which is over land as well as underneath. So I asked him about the depth of the underground barrier. He said it's classified because the whole purpose of having an underground barrier is to stop Hamas tunnels coming into Israel territory. Because Hamas in the past had built tunnels deep into Israeli territory. So the IDF seemed pretty much confident about the situation in Gaza when we were there. And just a week before the October 7th attack happened, IDF spokesperson said to the media that the situation in Gaza, what he termed was stable instability. Gaza might be unstable, but the overall situation is stable for us. The border is stable for us. And Israel's focus was on West Bank. Why? Because some 700,000 Jewish settlers are living in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. So Israel's, and violence was actually going up in West Bank. Some 200 Palestinians were killed prior to October 7 in 2023 itself in the West Bank. So Israel's security focus was on Jerusalem and West Bank. And from Hamas, I think they were prepared. Now there are reports that they expected some kind of attacks happening from Gaza. And my assessment is that the Israelis thought it would be another rocket attack, and they were prepared for that. Whereas what Hamas did, as you pointed out, was an innovative attack. It was aberrant. There is no doubt about it. Morally aberrant, because they targeted Israeli civilians. Some 1,200 people were killed. Most of them were civilians. But at the same time, from a military or a tactical point of view, what Hamas did was something that Israel hadn't experienced in the past. They sent thousands of Hamas fighters on paragliders, motorcycles. They first used drones to take down the surveillance posts. And it was also a Shabbat day, like the Yom Kippur day, which was a holiday. Here it was a Shabbat. And then they took down the surveillance post first. They used bulldozers to pull down the overland barrier. And then they sent batches of men into Israel holding rifles. And then they raided. It was a low-tech operation. It's not like that they were breaching the border with the tanks, heavy military armory or whatever, which would have been easier for the Israelis to detect. It was because here the infrastructure Hamas used was their men, their fighters. So it was a low-tech operation. It was an innovative operation. They must have planned it long in advance. But yes, Israel was also, you look at Israel's domestic politics, Israel was it was distracted in the last many months because of the judicial overhaul plan of Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel was witnessing weeks-long protests.
Yeah, every week there were protests.
Every week there were protests. So internally, Israel was distracted. Their security focus was on the West Bank, and from Gaza, I think they were prepared for a different kind of an attack. And Hamas, I think, exploited all these weak points and then launched this surprise attack.
Yeah, what they did was wrong. Absolutely. There's no doubt. Everybody is condemned. Even the UN Secretary General spoke of that. What Hamas has done is bad, but what Israel is doing is catastrophic.
Exactly.
And also the innovativeness, very, very unconventional, total surprise, shock, absolutely shocked. I spoke to an Israeli IDF officer about a month back, and I could feel that anger and, that thing. So it take time for Israel to come to grips with it. Now tell me that now we come to India's position. India was very quick to condemn the Hamas attack, but it took us 4 or 5 days for our finally MEA spokesperson to speak of humanitarian aid, So what do you make now about India's position in this particular conflict? And then overall, how difficult, what kind of tightrope walking are we going to be doing in the region?
Yeah, and I think India continues to do the balancing game, which we always play. Yes, the Prime Minister tweeted immediately after the October 7 attack, we condemned the Hamas terror attack, etc., etc. But again, if you look at the MEA statement, India has stated that India continues to support a just Palestinian solution, which means creation of a Palestinian state, two-state solution, etc., etc. And also, if you look at India's voting at the UN Security Council, so UN General Assembly, India abstained from the initial voting that condemned Israel's attack. Why? Because India's argument was that there was no reference to the October 7 Hamas attack on the Israeli civilians. But in the subsequent two voting, one was condemning the Israeli settlements in the West Bank, Palestinian West Bank and East Jerusalem. And the other was again condemning Israel's continuing occupation of the Golan Heights of Syria. So India voted in favor of these resolutions. So India has taken a clear position against the Israeli occupation of the West Bank as well as the Israeli occupation of the Golan Heights. So India's position, my understanding is that India's position is that India stands firmly in favor of the two-state solution. So it votes in favor of the resolution against the settlements because if you are in favor of the two-state solution, which means what? Which means the Palestinian state has to be created. Israel state is already there since 1948, but the Palestinian state is not there, right? The Palestinians are living under occupation. So how will you create a Palestinian state without Palestinian land? So you need land. And what is the Palestinian land? Which is the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. And in East Jerusalem, according to the UN Security Council resolutions, so in East Jerusalem, there are roughly 300,000 Jewish settlers are there. And in the West Bank, there are some roughly 400 to 500,000 Jewish settlers are there. So unless you pull them back, how will you allow the Palestinians to create their own state, right? So I think India's position is clear that we are in favor of a two-state solution, so which means we are against the settlements. So the settlements have to be pulled back, and you apply the same thing with regard to the Golan Heights. So, but at the same time, there is also a bit of realpolitik if you look at India's position. Israel is an important partner. You have very good, strong defense relationship, especially in defense and agricultural technology, etc., etc. So India doesn't want to upset that relationship completely, even when you stay committed to the two-state solution. And then secondly, especially, when it comes to terror issues, India is a bit sensitive because India considers itself as a victim of terrorism. So India sees what Hamas did on October 7 was a terror attack. So that's why India immediately responded to that. So I think here what India is trying to do is to do a balancing act. India condemns the attack, October 7 attack on the one side. But at the same time, India says that it remains committed for the two-state solution. But if you ask me, in my personal view, I think there is one thing is lacking here, which is India has to, I think, call for a ceasefire as well. Because what is happening in Gaza now, as you pointed out, is a catastrophe, as the UN calls it. 17,000 people were killed in 53 days of fighting, 7,000 children, which is unacceptable by any civilized standard. And it is, a vast majority of the global countries have called for a ceasefire, especially the countries in the global south. And India, being an emerging country which aspires to become the leader of the global south, I think should show leadership here. I'm India's balancing act. I understand clearly. I understand where it is coming from, but at the same time, I think India should be more emphatic in calling for a ceasefire because other countries in the global south are doing it, including China and Russia. They are trying to take on this leadership. So it is also in your interest to show the leadership and mobilize the public opinion in the global south and ask and call for a ceasefire because this cannot go on like this, what is happening in Gaza now.
Yeah, I agree with you. We were on India's position. Same thing, this, stand we saw with regard to Russia-Ukraine war also. Finally, if we really want to be leader of global South or South Asia or Indian subcontinent at least, as an emerging power, sometimes we will have to take, strong positions, seeing the world sentiments. And also tell me, Dr. Stanley, what about how does it affect India's relations with other Gulf countries and Muslim countries if we are so much appearing to be more on the side of Israel? At least our social media is full of pro-Israel narrative. Our TV media is full of pro-Israel narrative. So that means they are getting the kind of feed ki, run this kind of narrative. In the country, I see this kind of thing. So how does it affect? How do these people watch us? We have a large Indian diaspora working there. We have large Muslim population in our country. That is why our stand has been like that. So just try to explain this. Does it impact our future, prospects in this region in some way?
Yeah, what you said is correct in a sense. Social media is especially, the right-wing handles, if I put it that way. Very pro-Israel. Of course, TV channels are also. But I think the government is not taking that line. That's what I'm trying to say. So the government supporters may be all for Israel, but the government is trying to take a
Show,
very balanced,
appear to be.
yeah, very balanced approach, because it is the same government that voted in favor of the two resolutions that were overtly critical of Israel.
Hmm.
And Prime Minister Modi has also repeatedly voiced concern about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. When he talked to Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, he raised the situation in Gaza. He said the humanitarian situation in Gaza is intolerable. So, irrespective of, I know, because some of the social media handles are behaving as if they are IDF spokespersons. Some people haven't moved away from October 7. They are still talking about October 7. 17,000 Palestinians have been killed on the other side since October 7. They don't talk about it at all. Some people keep questioning about the veracity of the Palestinian death toll, as if, this is corroborated by the UN, and also the US State Department itself says that the toll could be higher because thousands of people bodies are lost in the rubble of the.
Yeah, that's what the UNSG said. This is the count we have,
Yeah.
and many more are under the rubble.
Many more, exactly. So yes, social media narrative is like that, but I think the government is trying to balance, take a very balanced position. My view is that I know India should have been more emphatic in calling for a ceasefire, which is not happening. But still, India is not seen as pro-Israel. India's position is not that. India is trying to balance. So hence, I think this is unlikely to affect our engagement with the West Asian countries, because India has very good ties with especially the Gulf Arabs. Qatar, we have testy ties, but with of course with the UAE and Saudi Arabia we have a stable relationship, and also other Arab countries, for example Egypt, etc. So I don't think the position India has taken with regard to this conflict would affect India's standing in the region. But at the same time, I wish it is also an opportunity for India to take a much more emphatic position to rally the public opinion in the global south to bolster your own leadership role as a leader of the emerging world. That is not
Especially,
happening.
we were president of G20. We are still for
Exactly.
few days, so it required. So that I can understand for government. But whenever we are trade ties with Israel, they're all on hard cash. There is, we are a big market, so we should
Yeah.
not worry too much about. Same is with America also. वो मैं
That's
बाद में
true.
करूंगा. Now, just tell me, while we are discussing, you mentioned Qatar. Though I've had discussions on, and I'm following that issue because of this 8 Navy personnel. How do you see this? This issue between India and Qatar on the 8 Navy personnel. You haven't written much about it, but how do you see it?
Yeah, I haven't written much about it because we don't have hard facts about it. There is a lot of smoke screen. So there were reports that the Navy personnel were spying for a third country. There were all kind of reports in the media, all based on sources and intelligence officials of other countries. So we don't have hard facts here. What I can say is that it is a serious crisis as regards India's concern, because you have 8 Navy personnel in Qatari jails who are now facing, sentences, etc. So this is, and also Qatar is a country you don't have very good relationship with. It is not Saudi Arabia or the UAE. So you will have to do a lot of diplomatic engagement in the coming days, because Qatar is very close to Turkey again, and Turkey keeps attacking you in international forums, especially raising issues in Kashmir, etc. And Qatar also, Qatar sees itself as a very influential player in the region. It continues to play a mediator for between the Americans and the Taliban, between the Israel. Taliban between the
It is
Israelis
now
and
becoming.
Hamas.
It appears that Doha has become the center point for all, even world politics, and at least
Yes.
West Asia and you can say Central Asia and South Asia.
That's true. That's true. Even the Israel-Hamas ceasefire, Qatar played the most instrumental role. And even in the future, if you want a lasting ceasefire, both the Israelis and the Americans will have to depend on Qatar. So Qatar has achieved that kind of diplomatic capital also. So I can't comment more on this because I don't know. I don't have facts. All I can say is that this is a major crisis which India is facing. And India will have to do a lot of diplomatic muscle flexing to get the Indians out of this
Yeah, a
quagmire.
lot of diplomatic muscle flexing, a lot of you can say soft diplomacy, and a lot of backroom. I think maneuvering we have to do without coming. And rightly, both the countries have maintained tight lip as far as the actual charges are concerned, which have been filtered through various sources. I don't know whether it's a case of omission or commission. That
Yeah.
is, they could be just simple Fauji people caught up in a wrong situation at wrong time. Now, tell me the role of US, the role of US in this region, and what is the US gaining by continuously supporting Israel, uh, blatantly. Biden landing up there, then
Yeah.
all their top leadership they keep coming to Tel Aviv very frequently. What signal does it send to the rest of the Gulf countries and other Arab countries?
Yeah. To answer your second question, it is sending out a very bad signal. And Arab countries are clearly upset with what the Americans are doing.
Hmm.
Because you can see that, after the Gaza summit in Saudi Arabia, Arab countries set up a committee, and the first country they visited was China. So they are sending a clear signal to the Americans that you are no longer the only superpower in the region. And so Arab countries are clearly upset, but they can't do more than setting up
Yeah.
committees and voicing their concerns. No, they usually don't do anything more than that. So that is one thing. And to answer your second question, it is an interesting question, which is a continuing debate why the United States always supports Israel, irrespective of what the Israelis are doing. Because you see the the difference between the US response to the Ukraine war and Israeli war. So in Ukraine, the United States was leading the Western public opinion. It has imposed sanctions on Russia. It has pumped dollars, weapons worth billions of dollars to Ukraine to fight the Russians. And they attacked even India for our abstentions in the UN General Assembly. And they always raised this moral issue. And the total number of civilians killed in Ukraine over the last 21 months is 9,500. Okay, so here 17,000 people were killed in 60 days. And the United States continues to support Israel, which is the occupying force here. So in the case of Russia, Ukraine, Russia was the occupying force. And you had the whole Western machinery targeting or, helping the Ukrainians push back the Russians. Here, the same United States is with Israel, which is the occupying force, which is collectively punishing the Gazans. So the contrast is, unmissable for anybody to see. So why the United States is doing this? There are multiple answers. This debate has been going on for a long time. One is, of course, Israel is America's closest ally. You have, in modern times, in modern diplomacy, you don't have any two countries who are so close to each other. Now, not even the United States and the United Kingdom. So Israel and the United States, they have that kind of a close relationship. The US sees Israel as a very close ally, and the US doesn't let Israel down, irrespective of what the Israelis are doing. That is one thing, which actually dates back to the Cold War era. So during the Cold War, the Americans found Israel as a credible ally in a region where you had hostile powers as well. And Americans also used Israel as a balancing force to keep the Arabs with them, because they didn't want the Arabs to go to the Soviet bloc.
Yeah.
So they wanted they played some kind of a balancing act during the Cold War. So now the Cold War is over, but still the United States continues to back Israel. The second explanation is what John Yash Mor calls the lobby. The Israel lobby is very powerful.
Jew lobby, and the money they hold in the US.
Yeah, the Israel lobby is very powerful, and they have influence in both ruling parties. Now, an election year is coming within a few months. Biden is going to face re-election, so he can't upset the Israel lobby. If he does that, they could turn against him. And the Republicans on the other side are all for Israel. So Biden faces political compulsions at home, so he can't really take a position against the Israelis because the lobby is very powerful. So these are the explanations. One is Israel's strategic value. The other is the power of the lobby at home. So Maj Gen Yash Mor had written a book about the lobby, which is
Okay.
The lobby is powerful in the media, the lobby is powerful in the academia, the lobby is powerful in the political circles, the lobby is powerful in Congress, the lobby is powerful in the White House. So it is very difficult
Yeah.
for Biden also to ignore the lobby.
So
So
he
this
can't.
explains, I think, why the United States remains steadfastly supportive of Israel, irrespective of what Israel is doing.
Now, coming to the moral question, if we come to the bigger moral question, how much of land, actual land of the Palestinians, have Israelis controlled? And without giving land, which they will not, is there
Yeah.
any lasting solution? Can we get any kind of a solution in
Yeah.
future?
So quickly, if you look at historically, the whole region, including today's Israel and Palestinian territories, was historical Palestine. And State of Israel was created within Palestine in 1948.
So this thing
And
is thinking, because a lot of our right wing handles, they say Palestine was never there, it was Israel. From, you see this kind of
yeah,
narrative being built in India.
yeah, they have to go and read Balfour Declaration, 1917, issued by the British Foreign Secretary. And the
Ah,
Balfour Declaration says His Majesty's government would support the creation of a national homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. Look at the language, it's their mother tongue, right? They can't make a mistake when they write English.
English, yeah.
Yeah,
Ah,
in Palestine. This is what the British Foreign Secretary had written. Go and read the mandate. The mandate in 1918, I think. 1918, League of Nations issued the mandate, and it's called the Mandate for Palestine. The British mandate for Palestine. Okay, forget it. When the Jews, the settlers formed the Jewish Agency as an organization to support the migration of European Jews and run the affairs of the settlers inside Palestine, they called, what they called themselves? They called themselves the Jewish Agency for Palestine. So
oh,
they themselves called it Palestine. So
yeah.
I think we should ask these people to go and read a bit when they say there was no Palestine.
Hmm.
So the point is that when Palestine, Israel was created. So in 1948, there was first Arab-Israel war,
Yeah.
in which Israel had captured some 23% more territories than what even the UN partition plan had proposed. Which
Okay.
means in 1949, Israel was controlling roughly 80% of Israel historical Palestine.
Hmm.
77% of historical
Ah,
Palestine, not 80, 77%. So
hmm.
23% was, actually taken over by Jordan, Egypt, etc., etc. So in 1967, Israel would capture the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, which means 100% of the Palestinian territories came under Israel's control
Hmm.
in 1967. And
Hmm.
ever since it has remained in Israel's control. So if you go and look at the Oslo Agreement of 1993, the Palestinians said they offered recognition to the state of Israel based on the 1967 border.
Hmm.
They said they need their future Palestinian state based on the 1967 border, which is 23% of historical Palestine. So the Palestinians were ready, they agreed to have their own state in 23% of historical Palestine in Oslo. But even that didn't happen, right? And within this 23% of territories, that is the West Bank and East Jerusalem, now there are 700,000 Jews living because settlement is a declared policy of the Israeli government. So the Palestinians would not get even 23% if they are going for a two-state solution now. So this is the major problem now. And even if you are talking about a two-state solution, there are three matters to be addressed. One is the border. What should be the border of the Palestinian territory? The Palestinians say 1967 border. But if Israel agrees to that, they will have to pull back 700,000 settlers from the West Bank. Which Israeli prime minister will do that?
Hmm.
How can they pull back 700,000 Jewish settlers? And the settlers are now a very important, powerful lobby in Israel politics. You have
Yeah.
two ministers, two far-right racist ministers in the government. I'm not accusing them of being racist. They were convicted. It's a fact.
Okay.
Itamar Ben-Gvir. They are backed by the settlers. So settlers have become a powerful lobby now in Israel's politics. So no Israel prime minister can pull them back. So border is one problem. Second issue is the what should be the capital of a Palestinian state. The
Hmm.
Palestinians want East Jerusalem. Israelis will never give East Jerusalem to the Palestinians. And the third is the right of the refugees, because in 1948, when the state of Israel was created, 700,000 Palestinians were pushed out of their homes. They became refugees. And according to international laws, they have a right to return to their homes. But Israel would never allow them
Okay.
to return to their homes, because if they are allowed to return to their homes, that will change Israel's demographics.
Right.
So there are all these issues, very complicated issues, which makes a two-state solution basically impractical. Like John Mayer Mor once famously said that the only practical solution to this crisis it is a two-state solution, but that ship has sailed a long time ago.
Oh, so we all talk of two-state solution theoretically for
It is
education
a dead
purposes,
solution.
but it's a dead solution. So what do you feel as a young journalist and as somebody who's read this and been there? क्या कुछ है future कुछ मतलब will there be peace ever?
So not in the immediate future, definitely. I can't actually envision peace when we sit, now in December 2023, looking at the conflict. But all I can say is that whether it is a two-state solution or a one-state solution, what you need is that you need a system where Israelis and the Palestinians live, with equal rights. Now, what is happening is that Israel, now it is effectively one state because the whole Palestine is controlled by the Israelis. West Bank is under Israel's military occupation. East Jerusalem has been annexed by the Israelis. Gaza is being pounded by the Israelis. So it's effectively one state, but it's one state in which Palestinians face a different set of laws. That is the reality now. That's why many people call it an apartheid. So this has to come to an end. So either Palestinians should have equal rights as the Jewish people or the citizens of Israel proper, or the Palestinians should be allowed to have their own state based on the 1967 border. Because there are enough UN Security Council resolutions that ask Israel to pull back from the territories it captured in 1967. So unfortunately, Israel is not ready for either of these two. And on the other side, the rise of Hamas has made the situation more complicated because Hamas is using extreme violence. It is an Islamist militant group. So which makes it less attractive for the Israeli side also to make compromise. So at this point of time, the crisis is very complicated. So I can't envision peace. All I can say is that if any solution should treat the Palestinians as human beings with equal citizens, which is not the case right now.
Yeah, very well put. Very scary, the situation, if this continues like this. If you'll now tell me a little bit about the political part of Hamas and the military thing, because you visited there. And are there leaders in Palestine which can put down Hamas and tell them to stop this violence, at least from their side? And will they be heard? Is there a situation like that?
I don't think so. I don't think so because Hamas has built its political capital on resistance to Israel's occupation. So if you look at Hamas's leaders in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed Deif. Yahya Sinwar is the political leader. Mohammed Deif is the leader of the Qassam Brigades, the military chief. They call him the cat with 9 lives because the Israelis tried to assassinate him many, many times in the past and he escaped. And nobody knows where in Gaza he lives, in which condition, no idea. There was only one photograph available which was released a long time ago. So we don't know. So and they draw support through their resistance against Israel. So they are not going to stop violence. And Hamas has political leaders who are based in Qatar. For example, Khalid Mashal is the chairman of Hamas's Politburo. And then you have, not Khalid Mashal, Ismail Haniya is the chairman of the political bureau. And you have Khalid Mashal, who was the former chairman of the Politburo, who is now the head of the external affairs of Hamas. So both Mashal and Haniya are very important powers inside Hamas. But I'm not sure whether even they can exert influence on the Hamas operative inside Gaza. They have their own autonomy. They are the ones who are being bombed, not Mashal or Haniya.
Yeah.
They are the ones who are fighting the Israelis. So they take decisions on the battleground. And also, if you look at Hamas's growth, the violence has only made Hamas more powerful in Palestinian politics. Because earlier, before Hamas rose to prominence, Fatah was the most important party, Yasser Arafat's party. And Fatah recognized Israel in 1993. And Fatah promised Palestinians a two-state solution. based on 1967. This was in 1993. 30 years down the line, this hasn't happened yet, right? So Fatah's actually political capital has gone down, whereas Hamas, which opposed Oslo, has gone up.
So they are going to remain the major powers in this particular. Yeah, we lost in between.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so I understand this. The way the Hamas military leadership is working, and now tell me, last question I want to ask you is that keeping the situation the way it is going now, even one state solution where Palestinians can live in peace with Israel, is that possible?
I think there are. See, at this point of time, both are utopian. Both looks utopian to me. Both two state and one state. But these are two possibilities. For example, two-state solution, we already discussed the challenges a two-state solution would face: border, capital, right to return, etc., etc. In a one-state solution, again, after the relationship between Arabs and Jews have been battered like this, it would be difficult for both sides to live in one state. But so both look utopian to me. But the possibility of at the same time, both in the maybe in the distant future, both could look possible solutions. In a sense, if Israel readies to pull back the the settlers, and respect their border, etc., etc., you can talk about a two-state solution. At the same time, one-state solution is, which means that you need to have either a federal structure or a secular constitution, and in which all the peoples, the Palestinian Arabs, Christians, and the Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs, all are respected, treated equally. Israel can become a diverse country. Like there are too many diverse countries in the world under secular constitutions. Or it can be a federal structure under a one nation. The Palestinians can be a different state or whatever, different authority, but under one structure. Again, where all people are treated equally constitutionally. So that is also a solution. So this, I think, there are activists who are now pushing for one state solution, asking for the apartheid to come to an end. And there are international diplomacies in favor of two-state solution. So I think both are there. And the Israeli hard right are now proposing three-state solution, because they are asking Egypt to take Gaza and Jordan to take parts of West Bank, and Israel will control the rest of the Palestinian land. And they don't want a Palestinian state at all. Because I was talking to an Israeli professor last year, and he said this: a solution can be achieved only with the Egyptians and the Jordanians, never with the Palestinians. This is what he said. So there are all kind of solutions in the air. But I think whatever it is, the basis of the solution is that the Palestinians should be treated equally. So again, if you are talking about a one-state solution, you look at the West Bank, the East Jerusalem, for example. East Jerusalem has been annexed by Israel. So from Israel's point of view, Israel's legal point of view, it is an Israeli territory. But the Arabs living in East Jerusalem cannot vote in Israeli elections. They can vote only in the local elections. So they are not treated. They are actually second-class people. Arabs who have been living in East Jerusalem for centuries. Yeah. So you cannot have that kind of a one-state solution, right? So if we are talking about a one-state solution, the Palestinians should have equal rights. They should be able to go. Only then you become a democracy. Otherwise, Israel calls itself the only democracy in the world, but Israel only democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah.
But the democracy applies only in Israel proper, not in the Palestinian territories, which is also controlled by the Israelis. So that is the dichotomy here.
Yeah. So very, very complex. One more thing that you mentioned, Jordan, Egypt, and all. Firstly, very quickly, which are the countries which support Hamas? Hamas को funding कहाँ से आ रही? Without money, no terrorist can exist. It's impossible. Ideology and Zingoism and religious fervor can give you a little josh, but you need money to buy weapons and recruit and all that. So which are the countries which are openly supporting Hamas? Who are funding these guys?
Yeah, nobody would say that they are openly supporting it, but I think Iran is supporting Hamas. And Turkey, apparently, there were reports in Wall Street Journal that Turkey is helping Hamas manage its finances. They are using crypto and other means to make sure that Hamas guys get money. And then Qatar was supporting or at least paying salaries for Hamas's government employees. And Qatar would also help reconstruction after every time there is a conflict with Israel. So Iran is actively helping them, even militarily. Iran is helping them. But
Hamas is a more Sunni organization. Iran was more
Hamas
aligned
is Sunni.
to Hezbollah, which is a Shia organization.
That's right. That's right. But I think from Iran's point of view, Iran sees Israel as its main rival in the region. And Iran thinks that helping Hamas would allow it to keep the pressure on the Israelis. So, from a geopolitical point of view, it makes sense for Iran to help Hamas. And Iran also projects itself as a protector of the Palestinian cause. Iran says the Arab countries dumped the Palestinian cause and moved away to be in bed with Israel, whereas we don't do that. So that Iran is trying to source some kind of legitimacy in West Asia by supporting the
Yeah.
Palestinians.
And in the Muslim world, to say that.
Yeah, in the Muslim world. Yeah. So Iran backs Hamas. And yeah, Turkey is also backing Hamas. I think Qatar is also. Others
Qatar
are not directly
getting
backing.
$1
But
billion in cash, I believe, sometime back.
yeah, yes,
Uh,
yes, they do. They do.
they
And
do.
and apparently Hamas has built tunnels under the Rafah crossing, which is their opening to the world, which is on the tunnels into the Egyptian side. We don't know whether Egypt is looking away. Egypt is allowing Hamas to do some kind of dealings. It is possible, but publicly Egypt never backs Hamas. But we don't know what is happening privately. But definitely Hamas is getting external support, and that's why they have survived and they are surviving.
I really, it's so fascinating to talk to you. Now, another thing that comes to my mind or I read, where does it leave Saudi Arabia, UAE, the rich Arab countries, flowing robes, very rich, opulent, and here
Yeah.
people are dying. Where does that leave them? They were almost, getting close to Israel. What is their position now with this conflict?
So they UAE has very good ties with Israel. They normalized ties with Israel during the Abraham Accords, and I think the Abraham Accords will survive. The UAE relationship, UAE Israel relationship will survive. But Israel also wanted to have ties with Saudi Arabia,
Mm.
which is now off the rails. So that is a casualty of this conflict. The Israelis wanted, or the Saudis also wanted to have normalization with Israel, and the Americans were pushing for it. But after this war, I don't think the Saudis would be in a position to do that. And the UAE also, they condemned the Hamas attack, but they are now becoming increasingly critical of Israel's attack on Gaza because yesterday's UN Security Council resolution was sponsored by the UAE,
Yeah,
co-sponsored by the
sponsored by the
UAE.
UAE. Yes.
Yeah. So Arab countries, they may not go for a complete breakdown in ties with Israel, etc. But at the same time, I think they face pressure from the Arab street, which they cannot ignore completely. So the kind of Arab-Israel peace which we were talking about until recently is not going to take off now, especially between Israel and Saudi Arabia. If at all, it would take time. So, which doesn't mean that the Arab countries would do anything drastic. No, they won't. They usually don't. As I said earlier, they might set up committees, they might raise their voices, they might try to channel some international public opinion, etc., and they would stop there. That's it. But at the same time, they also realize that they are being betrayed by the Americans. Because when something like this happens, when the United States throws its weight completely behind Israel, they actually feel betrayed by the Americans, and that can have lasting implications in the regional geopolitics.
That is where China and Russia come in
Exactly.
to
That's
fill
why
that.
President Putin. That's why President Putin was there in Saudi Arabia 2 days ago.
And that
That's
is
why
why
President
it
Xi
was the
Jinping.
yeah, it was it's Chinese which brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Iran, exactly. And when the Gaza war was going on, when Saudi Arabia hosted the Islamic conference in Saudi Arabia, the Iranian president was there in Riyadh,
Mm.
which was unimaginable 2 years ago, right?
Yeah,
So what you are seeing is that the China brokered peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. is deepening, whereas the American push to expand the Abraham Accords has hit a stone wall.
Very interesting, Dr. Stanly Johny. Very, very fascinating. I would love to meet you someday and pick your brain, because as military we sometimes read things on surface, but as a student, MPhil and PhD. How many times have you been to this region?
Oh, I have traveled West Asia quite a lot. So in Israel itself, Israel-Palestine itself, I think I visited thrice.
Okay.
My last visit was in November last year, exactly a year ago.
Okay.
But even in other parts of the region, for example, Jordan. So I have traveled in the region. I've met people, talked to them, tried to understand their politics, the way they think, etc., etc.
Great. Thank you very much. You are doing an absolutely fantastic job with the Hindu newspaper as a journalist. So thank you so much for giving
Thank you,
time.
General.
And I'm sure your analysis and your this thing will be watched by UPSC aspirants, other people to understand. And if not fully understand, at least ignite that. My job is to ignite that passion to study geostrategy, to study politics, to study other countries and India's relations. It's so fascinating to study. So any advice you'd like to give to my listeners? How should they study current affairs and these subjects?
No, I usually say if you are interested in international relations, you can't understand current affairs without understanding history. I think history holds the key. History and map. If you are a student of IR, you should look at the map. Your focus should be why a country is behaving in a particular way. I think history and map would give you the answers. So you build a base in history, you understand the geography, and then you read about the current affairs. That would give you a comprehensive picture. Or if you are reading only current affairs, if you are reading only the Hindu, I don't think that's going to help you. You read the Hindu, yes, but you also read a bit about history.
Yeah, and you brought about maps. You'll see so many videos on my YouTube channel where I say, if you don't have two maps on your wall, India political, India geographical, two maps to understand your country. And second is a world map. And third thing I say is a good atlas, because world map really you won't find Israel there. It's too small. So you need a good atlas to study this, And so these are I said, the basic tools anyone who loves this process of learning must have.
Exactly.
Chalo, thank you very much, Dr. Stanly Johny. What a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Pleasure, sir. Thank you, Jai. Thank you.